paranormal. It surrounds us. It's everywhere. Tonight, you will hear from the people who live and work within these highly active locations, all in the efforts to discover America's most haunted. With your host, ghost hunter and author, Dan Terry.
Good evening, boys and ghouls. Dan Terry, your ghost host with the most haunted, right here on the UNX Network in the middle of the 2022 Halloween season. What we've been waiting for, right? And hey, guys, when Halloween is over, we'll still be here. UNX Network will still be here. You need to keep tuning in because I have got some really interesting stuff I'm working on for after Halloween, including a big UFO sighting in nearby Whiteville, Virginia, and some folks who live in really very haunted areas that nobody seems to know about down in Virginia. And I met these folks recently, and it's going to be intriguing. And if you remember, I was in West Virginia a few months ago, and that's where I met our next guest, April. She owns the Charleston Ghost Tours of Charleston, West Virginia. And what these people did that month was amazing. They, in a matter of just a few months, put together an incredible convention of ghost groups, ghost tour groups, Bigfoot groups, all kinds of paranormal owners of haunted places. You remember the Haunted Majestic, those ships. I interviewed the owner. He was there. That's where I met him. The folks who own the old hospital, which is very haunted down in West Virginia, and just so many incredible people. So I wanted to bring her on here because inside of a few months, she made this convention of some of the most interesting folks I ever got to talk to. So let me introduce you to April Morgan. Hey, April.
Hi, Dan.
Hey, once again, got to compliment you on that background. It is awesome. I wish I had one like it.
Oh, I thank you.
You put together the most amazing convention inside of just like 3 or 4 months, right?
Yeah, actually, we started just after Christmas, and by April, we had it up and running.
And you had so many different folks. I was disappointed that, the Flatwoods Monster Museum, the Bigfoot Museum, and the Allegheny Asylum and the prison, that none of them managed to make it, but yet you had so many others. Is West Virginia just insanely haunted?
Well, I guess we like to say we have a lot of mysteriousness here in the mountains. We definitely have our fair share of paranormal activity with everything from cryptids to ghost stories to Appalachian witches. So pretty crazy.
And you're running the tour of basically the Charleston, West Virginia, which is the capital of West Virginia, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
Yeah. And how's that going for you? I mean, if the whole state's anything to go by, Charleston has got to be crazy.
Well, it's actually pretty great. We have a lot of participants from all over the world, actually. We have locals as well as people that are passing through. And then recently, we've actually had people coming to West Virginia specifically for paranormal experiences.
Well, I can understand that. We've had, the young lady from the Blennerhassett Hotel.
Oh, yes.
Adra, I met at your conference. And Dana from the Haunted Majestic.
Yes.
And the guys from Mountaineer Paranormal have been on.
Oh, yes.
So it's just incredible how much of the haunted folks, of the specialists, you was able to bring in inside of 3 months.
Well, the idea was that we knew it was here. We knew these groups, these places, these teams all existed. But but nobody had ever brought them together to work together before. And that was kind of the idea behind it, was just getting everybody in one place to, meet face to face and get these conversations going.
Well, the areas I've been in, and of course, I'm from mid-Missouri, near St. Louis, but I've been Missouri, Arkansas, Southern Illinois, and Kansas. That was my stomping ground. And none of those groups wanted to talk to each other. They would fight over, this is my neighborhood, these are my ghosts, you can't come here. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah. We definitely have, some of that attitude here. But we're trying to change all that and show people that, it's okay to share. It's okay to open your doors, because, somebody can open a door for you too. So it's a mutual, relationship.
Well, you got it better than any place else I've ever been, because, again, most of those teams won't even talk to each other. There's a few, but overall, most of them just badmouth each other, and there was no reason for it. I've worked with 3 groups out of Kansas, 3 or 4 groups out of Arkansas, dozens in Missouri and Illinois. And I found very few, maybe a couple, that I wouldn't work with. They were all very good, and yet they fight each other. And somehow you went past that and got these folks together in the most amazing way.
Well, I think that it has a lot to do with our culture here in the Appalachians, specifically in West Virginia. We've had a lot of experiences in our history where we've had to unite as a community and take care of each other, with a lot of experiences in our past with corporations from timber and coal and salt and natural gas and all of these other things. They kind of come in and they use up the natural resources, and then they leave the people high and dry. And so we've kind of had to learn to, take care of each other and watch each other's backs. And I think there's more of an openness here because of that. You're more willing to work with somebody because you know that, in the end, you're better off to have a community.
Well, that makes sense. West Virginia has always been kind of shut away from the rest of the state, at least from Virginia, because of the mountains and such as that. And then if I remember right, during the Civil War, West Virginia wanted to go to the north and Virginia wanted to go to the south. Am I right on that?
Well, there was a lot of mixed feelings here in West Virginia. There were a large portion of, North supporters, but we also still had our Southern sympathizers. And especially at that time here in the Kanawha Valley, we had the salt industry, and there was a lot of slave labor at that time. And so they were, a little reluctant to give that up. But ultimately, there was a change of heart, and everybody in the region kind of, decided in a wave of sorts that, this would be for the best, to join the North. And then you had the other plantations that still existed on the other side of the mountains over in Virginia that, they were still holding firm to their, to their past. And so we just kind of, said, let us be our own people. And so here we are, the only state born out of the Civil War.
Okay. Well, let's go back to what you said. You mentioned the witches. What are the Appalachian witches? Is that different from Salem or voodoo?
It's a bit different. Yeah. It's more of a mountain craft. You kind of lean on your natural surroundings more to heal or to to energize. You use natural herbs or plants that grow in the woods around you. You don't really have the opportunity for doctors and hospitals and things like in many places in West Virginia. So you kind of have to just learn what your grandma taught you. And a lot of times that's, what's referred to as mountain or Appalachian witchcraft.
Okay. Well, you told a story about mountain witches at one point. What was that about the brothers, I believe?
Yeah, so there at the time you could go out and claim new territory, basically by notching trees in an area, and basically you could claim that as your land. And as long as you maintained it and farmed it and kept it up, then that was yours. So this family was basically looking for a new area to do such, and so these two brothers were out looking along the New River Gorge for these, new nice area to farm, and they hit this really nasty storm, and it was just thundering and lightning. And at first they thought, we'll just make our way anyways, but the rain was really coming down, and then it started just thundering and lightning, just awful. And so ultimately they decided they were going to turn and go back when a big, huge clap of thunder just scared them half to death, and they took off running, and they got separated. And one of the brothers ends up over towards the gorge where the river is. So it's like really cliffy and lots of rocks and overhangs. And he ultimately finds this nice little overhang that he could kind of crawl under and build a fire and get dried off a little bit and let the storm calm down. And then he was going to go look for his brother and go back home. Well, as it continues on, there's just thunder and lightning all around. And he decides, maybe it's just for the best if I just, rest here for a while. The storm will pass. And so he cuddles it up and he kind of settles in, trying to get a couple of hours of sleep in this nasty storm. And he falls asleep, but he's awakened a short time later by a really, really, really loud clap of thunder. And it kind of just jars him up out of his sleep. And so he kind of is a little asleep, but awake. He's kind of in that state of in between, kind of trying to wake himself up. And he stands up and he walks over to the edge, looking down into the valley where the river is flowing below. And as he's doing this, he notices that, there's quite a heavy fog that has formed down into the valley where the river is below him. And it's kind of hanging right on top of the water. So he doesn't think much of it, because that happens pretty often here in the mountains. And as he's, kind of watching the fog dance across the river, he notices this like green kind of mist forming right below him, just down in the gorge still. But, it's pretty close to where he is, it's just directly below him. And he is just shocked. And he just can't take his eyes off of it. He's so drawn in by this mysterious green mist, rising up out of the rest of the fog that's, normal white fog. And he's watching it, and the thunder and the lightning is still going all around him, when all of a sudden everything kind of calms down. And he's watching this mist come up, and all of a sudden he hears this loud noise. And it's this really shrill kind of scream. And he has his full attention, and he's in a panic at this point. He's I'm seeing something weird, and now I'm hearing these noises, and he's, I can't really run in the middle of this storm. Plus I'm on this rocky cliff. What if I take a wrong turn and I fall down? So he's got all these thoughts, rushing through his head, and he is panicking. And he comes, back into this little corner of his overhang, and he's, really, really freaking out. And he calms himself down enough to like crawl back over and just peek over the edge. And he looks down, and that green mist is still there. And this time he hears a really loud voice that just says, "Get out." And he is at this point just, bewildered. He's done. He's like, I don't care what the storm is going to bring. I'm done. So he grabs his stuff, and he picks it up as fast as he can, and he's backing out from the ledge. And as he's doing so, right where he had been sleeping, the overhang collapses. So these rocks come tumbling down right where he had been sleeping.
Uh-huh.
And he just can't believe it. And so he's just shook, and he makes his way all the way back to his family cabin, and his brother had already beat him there. And he comes in, and he's telling his family this story, and their mother overhears. And she looks at him and she says, "You don't know what you just saw." And he says, "What are you talking about? I don't need, there's no way you can know what I saw, because I don't know what I saw, And she says, "No, that was the Golly Witch." and she was warning you. And if she hadn't have done that, you'd be dead.
Right.
And so most people think of, these witches in a negative sense, in a, foreboding kind of way. But this particular one was actually looking out for him.
Mm-hmm.
So, it was a unique twist, because you thought this whole time, you're growing up and, oh, stay away from, this house. It's got a witch in it or something, you're kind of always around kids telling these stories. And then to come to find out that there is actually a story that has been passed down through some families that, relates back to a mountain witch saving a life, not only in the sense of, herbal medicine, but really actually saving him from a tumbling rock. So it's pretty wild.
Tell me, is storytelling a major part of living in the mountains? Because you're really good at it.
I guess in a lot of families, perhaps. I enjoy it. I love sharing the stories that I have and being able to captivate someone with that, and just being able to draw somebody in and just share that experience. I think a lot of that is lost in today's world, where everything is through the internet, or through words that you're typing out, and you don't really get that face-to-face sharing experience. So I think that's why I get so passionate about it.
Well, your tours must be awesome. Let's talk about Charleston then. What is the main haunts there, at least where you're at?
Well, we have a few. We have probably our most popular haunt is the Oddfellows building in Charleston. And It was built around 1902 for Canal Lodge number 25. And the story that goes along with it contains a shadow of sorts. The person that told me the story refers to it as a shadow mass. And so she doesn't really call it like a shape of any sort. She just says it's a shadowy mass. And so I share this story with almost all of my participants that I take on the Mortar Man tour. And they actually take pictures of the building. And so many times they'll send me pictures later. And in the windows of the building, they'll be pointing out these black, shadowy, humanoid shapes in the window, or sometimes it's even a face. And it's pretty wild that the story kind of lines up with the evidence that they're sending me.
Well, you've told me before, but is this where the two cleaners dealt with the shadow?
Yes. So the story wasn't originally part of Charleston Ghost Tour Company when I first announced its opening. After I kind of put it out there on social media and done a few interviews with news networks and things like that locally, a woman had reached out to me that had worked there, and she had this story to share with me. And after she told me, I was like, I have to have this story for your tour, for my tour. Can I please use it? She said, that's fine. Just please don't use my name. And, so I was like, I can do that. I can change your name.
Yeah.
But yeah, so what it was is that she was working, and she worked at night. She cleaned the building, and she only worked with just one other girl. And so the older lady, the lady that shared this story with me, her name that I go by is Jane. And Jane worked with Katie. Katie was the younger one that worked alongside of her. And Katie was quite a bit younger than Jane, and she spent pretty much every night at the building with her cleaning. And so she ultimately had no social life because of that. And so, Jane really felt bad for Katie having to give up, pretty much any kind of youth outing or anything like that. So one day when Katie had come to her and said, could I please go to a bridal shower? Jane was ecstatic. She said, please go, enjoy it. I've got this. I'll take care of it. It's not a problem at all. And so she sent Katie on her way off to this bridal shower, and she had a great idea that, she was going to handle this building all by herself, and Katie was going to go have a good time, and they would both just end their nights pleasantly.
Right.
So Jane gets to work cleaning, and she goes through each floor. And when she gets to about the third floor, she's cleaning in the hallway. She's actually got her mop and mop bucket out. And she remembers, like, as she was getting it out, that in the closet, it had been pretty disheveled in there. And she didn't want someone to come in the next day and see it kind of disorganized and, all out of whack, and think that, well, what were those girls up to? And knowing that she had let Katie go without telling anybody, she didn't want anybody to get in trouble. So she thought, oh, well, I'll go in there and straighten that up really quick. It won't take that long. And then, I'll clean up everything else and just go home. So she goes into the closet. It's at the very end of the hallway, and it's got kind of like a heavy door on it that closes. And it's a pretty good size closet. It's got like a drain and everything in there for the mop bucket. And then it's got like a storage shelf. And so it's got, plenty of room in there for somebody to stand and organize it. And so she closed the door behind her, and she's in there organizing. And she'd been in there for a few minutes when all of a sudden she hears like a really loud, like, clap, like a really heavy door shutting or something like that. And it kind of sounded like the fire door that was on the stairwell. And, she thought, well, that's probably just Katie coming back, and didn't really think much of it. So she just kept doing what she was doing. And a few minutes later, she hears that really loud smack again. And she thinks, okay, well, maybe I better look this time, just to see if she's stuck in the stairwell or something silly, So she just pops her head out the door, and she looks down the hallway, and she doesn't see anything or hear anything else. And so she, goes to go back into the closet. And as she's doing that, as she's pulling herself back in, she is kind of turning her head and closing the door kind of quick. And as she does, she thinks that she may have just seen like a shadow shoot across the hall, but she's not like real sure about it because she was moving at the time. And so it wasn't really enough to convince her to like open the door again and look back out there. So she just kind of shakes it off and goes back to work, stocking the shelf. And this time she's another few minutes into it, and the same loud smack, clap, slam, whatever you want to call it, that same loud noise happens for a third time. Now, this time she opens the door to the closet, and she looks down the hall, and she doesn't see anything at first, but she knows at this point that there is something, strange going on. And she's kind of worried that there might be somebody in the building, or, a burglar, who knows, and she's in there by herself. And so she thinks, I've got to at least check this out for my own safety, So she convinces herself to go down the hall and look in all the rooms and make sure that she's alone. And so she does. She starts down the hallway, and, she's got her fist balled up, ready to go should anybody come out, and she's looking in each door, and she makes it all the way down to the end of the hall, and there is nobody there. No Katie, no burglar, nobody. So a little bit relieved, she's like, okay, I think that I'm just spooking myself out. I just need to just finish up and get out of here. So she turns and she starts back down the hall, completely intent on just finishing the job as fast as possible and getting out of there. And she's, walking pretty normal. And she gets about halfway down the hall, and she gets frozen in her step. And it's like that chill that freezes you, where you just are instantly freaked out. And she knows this because the hair shoots up on the back of her neck, almost like somebody is too close to her at the grocery store line. And you just know that there's somebody back there breathing on you. And she can just feel it. And so she's frozen in her step, and it takes every ounce of willpower she has in her to turn her head over her shoulder and look behind her. And when she does, she sees this giant black shadowy mass charging towards her. She takes off running full speed down the hallway into the closet, slamming the door shut behind her. Now, a few hours later, Katie comes back from the bridal shower. Jane is nowhere to be found. Katie like checks for all up and down the building, every single floor. She even checks into places they don't usually go just to, rule it out. And she can't find Jane anywhere. And so she thinks, okay, well, I'm just going to make one last swoop of the building. She probably has just finished and went home. I'm just going to make sure everything's put up and everything, and then I'm going to go home too. And so she does her normal little check to make sure everything had been closed up and lights turned out and, all this other stuff. And she makes it up to the third floor when she notices there's a mop and a bucket in the hall. And she thinks, well, that's kind of weird. Usually, we immediately dump it and put it up. But, maybe she just forgot because she was doing everything by herself. Who knows? So she just grabs the mop and she grabs the bucket and she's dragging it down the hallway. She gets all the way down to the closet and she opens the door and she reaches down for her mop and, kind of scoot it over the door frame. And as she's doing so, she notices over in the corner, there's Jane. And she's in this little tiny ball huddled in the corner and she's bawling her eyes out.
Uh-huh.
And Katie has no idea, like, what is going on. Has she been attacked? Has she been hurt? Does somebody hear what's going on, And she's, shooting questions at her. And Jane can't answer any of them. She's just sobbing so hysterically. And Katie pulls her up and she gets her out into the closet. And she's in the hall with her. And she finally gets her calmed down. And Jane tells her the whole story. She tells her, about the noises and there's the shadow figure and just all of this, coming at her at once, and she's just in a panic still. And at this point Katie's thinking, we're still in the same place that this happened, like we're in danger. So she grabs her purse and Jane grabs her stuff and they walk out the door together and they lock up and they tell each other good night and they split and they go each other separate ways.
Mm-hmm.
Go home for the night. And then the next morning, neither woman has talked to the other. They both call in at separate times and resign from their positions. Neither one would go back to work there ever again. Now, Jane would take it a step further, and she actually retired. She was not going to go back to night cleaning ever.
Wow, that's... So West Virginia, especially the Charleston area, yeah, the places I've been, the places I've investigated, there was a river with energy. There was limestone with quartz underneath. There was Indian burial grounds, Civil War battles, something that created the issue. What does Charleston have that causes so much of the hauntings? Any idea?
Well, there's a few theories out there. There are a couple of known curses that have been placed on the area. The Chief Cornstalk Curse, I'm sure you've heard of that one. And then we also have the Afghan Curse. It's a pretty interesting history if you dive into the Afghan people, Azgen. And then also, we have had our fair share of Civil War battling. We had the Battle of Charleston, as well as some pretty, rough upbringing through our settlement. We have quite a few characters in our history that I feel we might refer to as a bit rough these days, but back then they did what they had to do to make it because they didn't have anybody nearby. And then, as you were saying, there is the theory with West Virginia being completely consumed in mountains, and in addition to that, they are some of the oldest mountains in the world. Mm-hmm. It has a energy that flows through it, that flows through the mountains, that flows through the caves that go under the ground. We have so many underground rivers that you don't even see, and natural springs that bubble up out of nowhere. Our rivers, a large part of our rivers are started here in the state of West Virginia. Their headwaters are here in our mountains. And, so a lot of the energy, I feel like, just kind of bubbles up from the earth here in West Virginia.
Wow, that does kind of make for, if you'll pardon the term, perfect storm of paranormal activity.
Yes.
with that many different things going on. Tell me about the cornstalk curse. That I've heard of it, but I'm not placing that one.
So this takes place in Point Pleasant. And
Okay.
I'm not going to try to dive into the dates or any of the specifics because I haven't brushed up on it recently. But essentially, the Native Americans didn't want settlers to be in the area because they had already been pushed back, several times as, the population grew from Europe, and they were pushed over the mountains. And then once, all of that land was taken, then here they come over the mountains too. And so they just keep getting pushed further and further. And at this point, they're realizing, not only is the land that we farm and use and our hunting territory been taken away from us, but, our way of life as far as where we know to go to hunt, the streams we know to follow, we're being pushed off of all of that. And so, we're in a completely new territory, a new world. And that world already had other Native Americans in it. So, they were kind of being squished in between the middle here.
Right.
So it was kind of like being backed into a corner, and they had to fight. And the same way the settlers felt like they had nowhere to go, so they needed to come west. So they were kind of in the same position. And with both people having their backs up against the wall, it was a brutal scene, at the beginning of the settling in this area. And a lot of it was attacks back and forth between the tribes and the settlers. And it got bloody and it got really nasty on both sides. And the lead up was these attacks back and forth, on both sides. You can't really, say one side or the other because they were both doing it. It led up to this ultimate battle that took place in Point Pleasant. And so they captured Chief Cornstalk, and essentially, after seeing so many of his loved ones being murdered and, seeing his people die through diseases even that have been spread through the settlers, he had enough. And so he cursed the entire area and basically said that we would never prosper here. That, you basically wouldn't have a lot of opportunity to survive. And if you could survive, it would be a very rough life. It was like the basis of it.
So Chief Cornstalk, made this curse in the area where Mothman showed up.
Yes.
Is that related?
Yeah, a lot of people think so. It very well could be. There were, again, a lot of just really interesting occurrences that have taken place all up and down the Ohio River and, the Canal and other rivers throughout West Virginia. But absolutely, I think that a lot of tragedy that has happened here has stemmed from possibly Chief Cornstalk.
Okay. You do 2 tours, is that correct?
Well, I actually have 4 different routes.
Okay.
And then we have other events outside of ghost walks that we do as well. So we'll find like a haunted location that's willing to open its doors to us. And so we'll take you on a haunted tour or historic tour, your choice of the location. And then we will do a paranormal investigation where we bring in a professional team to work with you and show you the equipment and kind of break things down for you as to how to read these results and how to rule out, things that may contaminate evidence. And so we basically work with a lot of novices. And then for Halloween, we're actually getting ready to do our first professional investigation event where we're bringing in a bunch of teams to do a 4-hour investigation at a abandoned coal company store. So.
That's the Eitman Company store that you're doing.
Yes, the Itman Company store.
Itman. Well, what do people have to expect? What is the legends from there?
Well, I don't want to give too much away, but
of course.
If you are familiar with the coal history in West Virginia, Itman would be no different as far as having their uproar of the Union coal miners during the 1920 era. And they basically have a lot of activity, they feel, and I haven't got to be there to investigate or anything yet, so I'm excited to get in. But they feel that a lot of the activity and the energies that are taking place there are related to the miners themselves.
So historically, is this one of the cases where they try to use government violence and force to make the miners go back to work?
So a lot of that happened throughout West Virginia. I am not positive on if the government was specifically involved at Itman, but I know that they were in that area at the time, so it's very, very possible that they were. But I do know that the historical information that we're getting from there, along with the paranormal information, we're kind of throwing that all in a file together and trying to tie it together as much as possible. And we have some locals that actually grew up going to that store when it was still a coal company store. Mm-hmm. And so we've got a lot of firsthand accounts from when it was in action as a coal company store. And so she's giving us a lot of knowledge about where things took place, where inside of the building. And it's a huge location. It's going to be a challenge for us because it is so big, but it is a fantastic opportunity. It's never before had a sanctioned investigation at it. The owners have been so kind that they are allowing us to come in and open it up to the public even, and hold this event here. So we are just thrilled about it. It's a pretty exciting thing, and the town is actually super excited as well. We've had a lot of people that are residents in the area, and they have, written to us and said, we're so excited that you're coming. We haven't had a lot going on here, so we're really excited to bring an event to them and also to share in their history and their paranormal fun. So.
Well, after you collate the evidence, I hope you'll come back and tell us about it, because it would be incredible. The history of coal mining, and especially company stores, is kind of horrific in its way. Oh,
yes. It gets pretty I don't know how PG you want to keep it, but it gets pretty bad.
Basically, they kept people in a state of indentured servitude by making them owe you. Yeah.
Oh, yes. And it is it goes beyond that in a lot of locations. It even went so far as to, like, if the male member or the miner in your family couldn't work, if they had been injured or even if they had been killed, come the 30th of the month, your bills were still due with the company. And the only way that you could pay these bills is with scrip. And the company scrip had to be earned through the coal mine. So you had to go to work in the coal mine to earn the scrip. Well, the only people that could do that were males. So if you were a wife or a mother or a daughter of, a coal miner that could not work, you couldn't take his place in the mine, but you were still expected to pay those bills at the end of the month. Now, recently there has been something come out that has been called ESAL script. Now, in those situations, they would accept payment in the physical form from a female. So they would send the female off with one of their guards to pay their bills physically.
Okay.
You're
right. It's more horrific than even I thought.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it wasn't just the miners; it was the entire families that were suffering, and it was a very tragic time, really, in our past. Yeah, when we look back, we should have learned a lot from it, and I'm glad that different standards are in place today, because it's just awful what they experienced. And then we have other tragedies as well, that had to do with mining. Other things like the Hawk's Nest Tunnel. If you ever get the chance to, excuse me, sorry.
Sure. You're fine.
If you ever get the chance to research the Hawk's Nest Tunnel, it was a horrific scene as well, and it had a lot to do with silicone. So they would mine the silica and they would breathe it in, and a lot of them, inhaled so much of it that it just killed them. And it killed lots of these workers. And so a lot of people say that that's in part, why the Hawk's Nest New River Gorge area is so active with spirits.
I'll have to check that out. Is there ghost tours or ghost groups, or have you been there?
There are no active teams in the that I'm aware of that work just that area that I'm knowledge of. But Haunted Beckley and Charleston Ghost Tour Company often team up for events in that area, and so we do have a lot of contacts and places. So if you're interested and want to come up, I'm sure we could show you around.
I will make that trip. I still have to meet the man from Haunted Beckley. I saw him at the conference, but I didn't get to talk to him. So.
Oh, yes. Scott's great.
All right. So let's go back to Charleston. Can you give us one more good story for Haunted Charleston that is on your tour?
Sure. I can give you one of our more popular ones on the grounds of the Capitol. How about that?
Perfect.
So our Capitol building is this beautiful building. It's got this gold dome on top, and it is just the pride of West Virginia. It is, in most West Virginians' opinions, the prettiest capital of all the states.
It does have a Congress look to it. The big dome.
Oh, yes, it's very ornate and beautiful. We're just super proud of it. But on the grounds of our Capitol building sits a original house that was built by the Ruffner family. Now, the Ruffner family were one of the first families in the Kanawha Valley, and they actually gained a lot of wealth through the salt industry. And as that wealth grew, so did their property. They just kept buying more and more property as time went on. And ultimately, they owned a very large swath of land that held a good chunk of the Kanawha River. And part of that was the grounds that our Capitol now sits on. And so this house was built by a second generation Ruffner, and he decided that he would take his money, and he was going to build this tavern / inn in this very prime location. At the time, he knew that as things progressed and more people came into the area, that they would be building a road. And eventually this road would be called the James River and Kanawha Turnpike. And it would eventually evolve into a stagecoach route. And as he is thinking about the future and where this might lead him, he decides this is the perfect place, right on the edge of this road. And the only thing on the other side of it was the river. So he didn't have any competition as far as that goes. So he built this lovely little tavern / inn, and it had a lot of really well-known people of the time. Andrew Jackson, I believe it was, and Henry Clay, if you're familiar with Henry Clay, and a few other really, notable names from that time also stayed with him. But as he was very involved with his work, he didn't have a lot of time to spend at home. And one of the spirits that's said to reside in this little house that's known as, it's not a little house, I should say. It's a pretty big house. But inside of this house that's known as the Holly Grove is a little boy. Okay. Now, I know that the security guards that I often talk to him about, they refer to him as Little Boy Blue. And he's often seen in little blue shorts with white knee-high socks, a white blouse, and he's got blonde curly hair. And he stands about, about a 5 or 6 year old boy, pretty small. But they see him, running up and down the stairs inside of this house when they go to check on it and, make sure that it's secure and everything. And nobody should be on the inside. So, they see a little boy, it kind of freaks them out. So, I've had a couple of them stop me and tell me about their encounters with him. But it comes to find out that supposedly the Ruffner father that was so involved with his business and didn't have a lot of time to spend with his family was just that, away on business. And the mom had to handle all of the, internals of the house. She basically ran the inn. So she had a lot going on. And even though they did have servants, they, I'm sure, probably had a servant assigned to watch the children. I'm, positive they probably had that. Right. This little boy was playing on the banks of the Canal River, and supposedly he tripped and he fell in, and unfortunately he passed away. Now, this is the rumor. There's never been any document, but at that time, unless it was, recorded in the church or in a family Bible or something like that, most of the time we wouldn't have any record of it at that point in history, because he wouldn't have reached an age to have anything notable paperwork wise at that point. So we're not really sure. We do know that Daniel did have a son, but we haven't been able to find any record of him drowning.
Okay. Or living, apparently.
Right.
Yeah. He didn't grow up to be a senator or anything.
Right.
Okay. You told me, I believe, about, was there a cemetery that kind of got moved? Was that in Charleston?
Yes, that is Ruffner Memorial Park, again with the Ruffners. It was originally part of their land as well. A lot of downtown Charleston, actually all of pretty much downtown Charleston until you hit the Elk River, was part of the Ruffner land. Okay. So they had this little area that they had delegated as a family cemetery. And in the 1800s, Charleston had begun to grow, and it had, quite a boom in population. And the city had basically figured out, we got a lot of people here, but what happens when something happens to them? We don't really have anywhere to put them when they pass. So they needed a, city cemetery. And so they went to the Ruffner family and they asked to purchase this plot of land, and the Ruffners agreed. So for, several decades, many Charlestonians were buried here in this city cemetery until around 1920. And in 1920, they determined that, this is not going to be big enough for all the people that we have in Charleston now. So we're going to have to find something bigger. So they did. They found a beautiful hillside overlooking the city, and it's a huge cemetery called Spring Hill Cemetery. And so they moved. Well, before I say that, let me give the disclaimer. They went to all the families of the buried people there, and they said, if you want your loved one moved, it's going to cost X amount of dollars. And if you have that money, we'll take that and we'll move them. But if you don't have that money, well, they laid their headstones flat, and then they covered the entire area with 18 inches of soil and turned it into a city park. So today, not many residents even of Charleston know that as they're walking through Ruffner Memorial Park, watching kids, kick soccer balls over the land and, the dogs walking through the yard. They're all walking in a cemetery. There are people below you, and a lot of them, will never have knowledge of who they are or, anything like that. Now, a school from Ohio did come in and did ground penetrating radar. And this was just a couple years ago. They gave them a really small area that they were allowed to look. And they successfully did find, I think it was around 26, 27. Don't quote me on that number. I want to say what they think, are definitely identifiable graves. But we know that there are lots more. We have an idea of, we think maybe to 150 to 200 more. So it could be a lot bigger of a cemetery than just the park itself. We aren't positive. So, somebody living downtown might have some graves in their backyard they're not aware of. I don't know.
Well, that would be a reason for the area to be haunted on top of the river and the tragedy and everything else.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
April, where can people find more about you and your tour? It's getting to be that season. I'll bet you're busy.
Oh, yes. Yes. Every weekend. We are at charlestonghosttourcompany.com. We're also on Facebook and Instagram. You can find us on either of those. We try to keep both as updated as possible, but we do keep a calendar on our website that is updated, as well as descriptions of all of our tour routes and upcoming events. Hopefully you guys can come check us out.
Well, I hope you'll keep me informed on anything you get at the Itman Company store, because that sounds exciting.
Oh, absolutely. We will. We will for sure keep you in the loop on that one. And we're really excited about it. We were hoping to go live there, but it's so rural. There's no cell phone service.
Gotcha. Well, April Morgan, you are the owner and the guide and the storyteller for the Charleston Ghost Tour Company. Thanks for coming back. I appreciate you coming in for us.
Thank you so much, guys. Happy hunting.
Happy Halloween. Take care. All right, friends, it is the Halloween season, and we have all been looking so forward to it. But like I said at the beginning, we are going to be here afterwards on X Network, and you need to subscribe. How do you do that? Go to the front page of our website, unxnetwork.com. Go down a little bit. There's a thing there for the free subscription. And what do you get out of that? You get the monthly UnX newsletter. And that kind of gives you an idea of what's going on, some of the guests, some of the stories. You get access to the X blog. And I just tried to post one on the X blog. I wrote an article specifically on legends of Halloween. And I'm not talking about witches and headless horsemen. I'm talking about the stories of cults kidnapping children, of candy being poisoned, or sharp objects put in fruit, or whatever. I put that article in, and they decided to put it in the October magazine instead. So that'll be coming out on the digital copy. And if you're a member, these are some of the magazine covers. If you're a member, you get one of these sent to you digitally. So it comes up in your email, you hit on it, you've got it, and it's free. So all you got to do is type in a little information about your name and email address, become a subscriber, newsletter, X blog, and a digital copy of the magazine where that article will be. And it should be out in the next few days. So what are you waiting for? Get on, join up. And as far as my guest, I thought April did a great job, hell of a storyteller. But what do you think about the reason Charleston is so haunted? The river, tragedy, Indian burial grounds, Indian curse, cornstalk curse. Maybe that's part of it. Hey, jump on the comments. Tell me what you think about it. I'm curious what your opinion is of this. And I guarantee you I will read it. So Oh, one more thing, real quick. I do have a speaking engagement I'm doing in the Appalachian Paracon. That's on March 18th of 2023 at the Haunted Blennerhassett Hotel, right there in Parkersburg, West Virginia. And that city is just about an hour away from Point Pleasant, where the Mothman was seen. And if you come to the hotel and get tickets, you also get a ghost tour available of the city. This hotel has held a serial killer, and the guy who built it, his spirit is seen there often, amongst others. And so you get the ghost tour, a ghost hunt, plus an amazing amount of speakers. And I just went through the vendor list. Wow, huge vendor list, huge number of speakers. Come on down if you get the chance and visit me, and I'll be there with some stuff from KUNX. So let's see what happens from the UNX network. I guess that's about it for today. So you all stay in that Halloween spirit, enjoy it, and stay spooked. Good night.